Well, good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know, I do appreciate it. Talking to John Hupalo on the program today. He is a college admissions expert, one of the foremost experts, I might add. And we're lucky to have him as a Prudent Money contributor. And he comes on about once a month, every first Wednesday of the month. And today is that day, and we're talking about everything that's happening in Washington and the Department of Education, and a lot of upheaval in all agencies, and everybody's under the microscope. What's this mean for college student loans? And John breaks that down for us and goes through that, and a lot happening. So check that out. That's on today. And if you got a question for me, if I can help you evaluate anything from a financial planning standpoint or look over any of your investments, I'm always available. Info@prudentmoney.com is where you'd send an email, and we can get you set up very easily. This is Bob Brooks. I hope that you enjoy the program. Hey, John, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Bob. Nice to be with you this afternoon.
I want to read through a news report that came out last week and kind of stop along the way to get your feedback. It says, amid President Donald Trump's threats to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education and recent reports that Elon Musk's secretive government slashing effort, the Department of Government Efficiency had gained access to confidential student loan data. Consumers advocates are issuing warnings to borrowers. Let's just talk a little bit and get caught up, because it's been a month since we've talked. What is the current standing of the Department of Education in regards to Trump's initiatives?
Yeah, Bob, it's every day is a new adventure in Washington.
Pretty much.
There was a time a few years ago we used to joke about taking comfort that nothing happened quickly in D.C.
Right.
And now it seems to shoot first, aim later, and kind of figure it out as we go along. So, yes, things are moving at the Department of Education now. It's going to be on a faster track. And the reason why it will be on a faster track is that Linda McMahon was confirmed just on Monday as the Secretary of Education. So she may, if she's not the last of the confirmed appointees in the cabinet, she's pretty close to the end of the line. But she comes, as you know, with a big background as a CEO of a very successful company. So one of the really interesting things is that the president has been saying for quite a long time now that he wants to basically close the Department of Education. And that, of course, is part of that shock and awe campaign that you and I talked about last month. But the reality of this is that the new secretary, in her very first speech to her colleagues at the department and then sent around an email, basically said that, we're really here on a bigger mission. And her quote, which I really thought was interesting, she said, "We must start thinking about our final mission at the department as an overhaul, a last chance to restore the culture of liberty and excellence that made American education great." And the reason I wanted to say that, Bob, is that we won't talk about any of the DEI or the woke talk or any of that. Let's just focus on what the core mission of the Department of Education is. The President Trump, like many Republicans before him, has really focused on trying to get the Department of Education to be focused on education and not a lot of the other things that it has taken on over the course of the last 30 or so years. So the last thing I'll talk about, and I think it's important for people to understand the philosophy of where this is heading. The secretary said in her remarks that there were basically three core things that she's interested in to fulfill the president's mission. And his mission really is to dismantle the Department of Education, because closing it per se, just literally going over there and tacking a close sign on the door, would require congressional action. So really what the Department of Education is doing is talking about how they're going to disassemble it, and with the three core convictions in mind. One is that parents should be the primary decision maker for their child's education. Second, taxpayer money should be spent on math, reading, science, and history, and not some of the other things that the department had been championing. And the third, and this is where we start getting closer to the student loans, is post-secondary education should be put people on a path to a well-paying career aligned with workforce needs. And it's really interesting from the policy perspective, because a lot of folks have been saying over the last several years that what education is providing is not necessarily what the jobs are seeking. So there's this realignment that's going on. So from a philosophical perspective, without all of, again, the wokeness and the DEI chatter around that, the core mission of the department is what Linda McMahon has been confirmed to do. And that is define that mission and then redefine what the Department of Education is going to look like. And the last thing I'll say about the very high-level stuff, in the president's style, he said, Linda, I hope you do a great job and you put yourself out of a job really soon. So that's where they're going, and they're going pretty quickly.
Now I'm assuming that there's an issue here with processing of student loans, which I would assume the DOE handled. Is that something that can be, use the word, easily switched to another government agency?
Yeah, but interesting, Bob. The Department of Education, and we talked about this last year with the whole FAFSA fiasco, the Department of Education actually does very little of the actual processing itself with federal workers. For the most part, those are contracted services that come in. So the Department of Education contracts with a number of student loan servicing operations across the country. And they basically administer those contracts. So it's not as if we have federal employees there actually processing student loan payments. All of that function is outsourced to these other larger firms. And if my recollection is, there are 5 or 6 of them that are out there collecting on all of the federally issued student loans. So the job of actually getting the check in or the payment coming in and then processing it is all done by these third parties. So I don't think that the problem will be that we need to repurpose all these federal bureaucrats who are doing things like processing payments. The big jobs that are being cut are on the policy side and in some of the initiatives around some of the like DEI type of programs that the department has been really pushing over the last several years. So I don't think student loan borrowers, frankly, have all that much to worry about with the concern to who should I make my payment to, what happens if I'm not able to make a payment, going to that student loan servicer and going to studentaid.gov and figuring out who your student loan servicer. You and I have been talking about this for several years now. Borrower gets in trouble, the first stop is to find that student loan servicer and see what the options are to get back on the right track.
I guess what concerns me is that all this movement is potentially going to occur, and most people, they just kind of make their payment and don't pay attention to things that they need to maybe check into.
Yeah, I think that is a concern because, remember, it wasn't really until about a year ago that student loan payments were required to be made. We had that whole pause go on for
right.
3+ years, and so they got out of the habit of making the payment. And then the Biden administration, remember we talked about that on-ramp where they weren't going to report the borrowers to the credit unions for about credit bureaus rather for about a year's time, and that ramp is now over. So to your really good point, I just started, if I'm a student loan borrower, I just started making my payments again in the fall last year maybe, and now all of this rhetoric is coming out of Washington about closing the Department of Education and student loan forgiveness is not going to be a thing anymore, and what does it mean to me? And I think it goes back to my fundamental belief through this whole period. What it means to you is you should continue to pay on your student loan. If you have trouble paying on your student loan, call your student loan servicer and find out what those options are. And then from there, just again, try to drown out or let the noise that's going through the whole program right now not affect what your behavior is going to be.
Let's talk a little bit about these confidential student loan data files. Can you think of any good reason why they would go in there and take those.
I am at a loss for why that would be required, other than the Musk Doge team has been on a mission to show how inept the current federal government, or I'm going to say the previous federal government, was. And just think of what I believe the facts are around this very well publicized data about the number of Americans who are still in the Social Security Administration database, who are 105, 120, 200 years old, 300 years old, whatever it is. And the claim is that they were being paid. And I think the data that I've seen and the response to that is that there was something like 88,000 recipients of Social Security payments over the age of 100 in the last year, which was pretty close to the number of people that we thought were that age. So it wasn't as if there are millions of people over 100 years old getting these payments. So I'm wondering if they're not going into the student loan database to find out, is there fraud in that system where folks were taking loans fraudulently? I saw in the newspaper the other day some lady, I don't remember where she was from, but she's going to jail for 3 or 4 years because she took something like $20 million worth of loans on behalf of people who did not. So there is, my point of this, if you want to really look at it objectively and without emotion, there is waste, fraud, and abuse that they're trying to root out. I think the shoot first, aim later approach, is an interesting one. But so again, your question is there something there that they want about students specifically? Maybe not. Maybe they're trying to find out if there's widespread fraud in the application and the making of these student loans. But again, that's total speculation on my part. I have no idea what they're actually doing in that database. But one other thing on that, they're currently not in that database. As soon as all of that came to light, there were a couple of lawsuits, and one of them stuck. It was put out by the American Federation of Teachers, and they sued under the Privacy Act. And in February, the February 24th, I think it was, a judge actually blocked Doge from accessing any of those files until March 10th. So they could go through and find out, exactly what it is Doge was looking for.
The more that you talk about it and you give a lot of good information with the story, I wonder if they're looking for those home run situations where there is major fraud, because you think about they're going in and they're going to these government agencies and they're spending a day and they're coming out with all this information. The first thing that comes to my mind is how in the world are they coming up with all this information that fast?
Well, exactly right. And the answer to that we all have heard is, AI, so artificial intelligence, and they can write algorithms. And I even heard it the last few days with some of the politicians talking about, and I heard someone say, Elon Musk and his algorithms, and it wasn't Elon Musk and his team or Elon Musk and his staff. It was Elon Musk and his computer algorithms, which is, very different for me, at least, probably you too, where, we didn't grow up with a cell phone in our hands, right? It was learned behavior for us.
Yes.
But for the Doge 20-somethings, this is how they think, act, and work. So it's a shock and awe in a lot of different, on many different levels, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, I know. I feel the same way about AI. I look at it and I go, surely this is more than just a search engine, which is what it is for me. I mean, a really supercharged search engine. But it's amazing to see that work and how that's going to turn out. But do you think that a lot of these nonprofit groups are saying, take a screenshot, make sure you got all your updated information, because errors are going to occur? Do you think it's a little bit of an overreaction?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're some of the consumer finance groups and some of the student loan protection, I'm going to say the protection people, They come in lots of different varieties across the country, but some of them are very well known. And they're saying things like this, take screenshots so you have the information. And interestingly, when I heard that, I had exactly the reaction, well, that's an overreaction. And then on the other hand, well, it's not such a bad idea, right?
Right.
Everything right now is electronic. And so if you're there and you take a screenshot, I think of it more personally as some way to comfort myself that if somehow something happens, with a crazy cyber attack or something, at least I have some record. So from that perspective, I think it's, again, from a generation that didn't grow up with a cell phone in my hand or a computer at my lap 24/7, I get a little nervous even sometimes about applying for things online or paying. And so, if that gives someone some comfort, then I think, well, why not? What's the loss of that?
Hey, these kids these days have no idea what a great invention the 8-track tape was.
Yeah, precisely right. It's a different world. And honestly, I'm at a conference right now at the College Savings Foundation, and these are a group of about 150 people who run the 529 businesses across the country. And there's a lot of discussion about AI and how, again, to use it productively and to understand that it's more than a search engine and how is it helping businesses. There's a gentleman came this morning from one of the big, we're in California, so Silicon Valley venture capitalists came and just talked really fascinating discussion about how AI is going to really have quantum leaps in the not-so-distant future. So understanding it is really important. And I think going back to the student loan question, and I was thinking about it as I was sitting there listening this morning, student loan payments and borrowers of student loans and those who are making the payments, all this fancy stuff is great. But I just want to make sure that if I send my payment, that it's going to be applied properly. And if I'm eligible for one of these loan forgiveness programs, as it was promised to me, that it's going to be available. And I hope that whatever comes out of the coming weeks, and I'm sure that we'll talk some more about this in the next few months, but whatever comes out of it, everyone just hopes and prays, frankly, that it's fair to people who thought they had one deal and maybe are winding up with something they didn't really anticipate, and frankly, maybe they didn't contract for. So we'll have to see how that all comes out.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Talking to John Hupalo here, and he is a college administration expert, and comes on the program once a month. Always very blessed to have you come in and share your wisdom and knowledge with what's going on. So if you want more information, mycollegecorner.com is a great website. And really everything you need to know to get up the curve on a very expensive process. So let's talk a little bit about just kind of the end result of this. Do you see anything in the student loan program benefiting from this process of evaluation? And I mean, there's definitely, a system where you can borrow an unlimited amount of money. There's just some things that really need to be reviewed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Bob, I think you're right. And one of the outcomes as the Secretary dismantles the Department of Education, what does that really mean, I think is a question. And so what it could really mean is that they'll start to look at the functions. So for instance, there's one program that's set up specifically for funding low-income K-12 schools that was actually run by the Department of Health and Human Services before the Department of Education existed. So it could well be that kind of program moves into HHS. It could well be, and it's highly likely, this is not a could well be, this is a highly likely outcome, is that some of the grant money that is currently used or scholarship money or some of that will go to the states. This administration is going to be very big on returning the power to the state because what we said at the beginning, they wanted the parents to be able to make the decisions and the states closer to the parents than the federal government. So we're going to see a lot of money, I think, moving down into the states. And then the question about what's going to happen with the student loan grants and programs. And I've always thought, frankly, that the U.S. Department of Education, just by the very name of it, should not be the largest lender to students in the country. That's
right.
a treasury function. And so I think it's highly likely that that will end up over a treasury, maybe in a better place, which gets to the question you asked, well, what does that mean for student loan borrowers? And if you have folks at the Treasury Department who more likely have a background in banking and the like, it's more likely then that they're going to have an answer with regard to payment programs that will make more sense, I think, than the political answers. And we right now had 8 or 9 different repayment programs that students could choose from. And I think what we're going to see is there'll be one program or maybe 2, but I don't think there's going to be a huge number of them and pick and choose. And I don't know about you, Bob. I love ice cream. When I go to like Baskin Robbins or one of these places where there's 30 flavors, I'd rather just have 2 or 3 choices, right?
Yeah,
and
sure.
I'll be just as happy. And I think the same way with the student loan payments. Let's try to simplify the system. I'm trying to be very optimistic here that at the end of the day, the administration is going to say we have to have a loan and grant program that supports the needs of a wide swath of students, from those from disadvantaged backgrounds to those, the wealthiest. They all want to go and get post-secondary education. Now, they may not all want or have to go to college to get the job they want, which gets us back to that third point that the secretary talked about. It's like, what's the best path for a student to get the education, which now means maybe a degree or a credential or some time at a tech school or whatever it might be, to get the job they want, right? And where do we want to put our money so that we're supporting those students to achieve their educational outcome? So that could really be a very interesting argument. The question, of course, will be, what's the process to get there? Will the Congress be involved? Will it be an administrative fiat? How is it going to happen? So I think your question is the right one. There will be a program to support students. It may look a little different than it does today, and that doesn't help people who are paying student loans today, but it should help set the stage for more successful outcomes for everybody down the line.
You know, as complicated as that process has become, I can only imagine that they are treating that like a powder keg and hope it didn't go off. So it makes you wonder if they'll kind of back off the rhetoric and maybe kind of leave things alone for a bit.
We'll see. That certainly has been the pattern, the early days of the administration. And when you're shooting first and firing later, and we've seen it in the tariffs, discussion of the tariff one day, the next day it's been averted. There is a little bit of this, let's lay it all out there. Let's do the shock and awe. We'll fire, aim later, and we're going to fix stuff. And, Elon Musk's background is very much like that. As a tech disruptor, he went in and broke things, and his rockets early in the process, they were going up a little bit and they were crashing. And he would say, "Okay, this is really good. It went up 50 feet. Now we're going to get it to go 75." And that idea of technology disruption and fail fast, is really important to them. And they're right now applying that same philosophy to a government, which may not be suited to actually react favorably to that kind of test and learn in such a quick way. So, there's a lot going on. You said it at the top exactly right. There's an awful lot going on. It's not going to stop anytime soon. But hopefully, in a year from now, we can look back and say, you know what, some really good things came out of that process. And hopefully they don't break anything so that people are seriously injured, meaning borrowers or those who need money.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you think about it, most of the data that he gets and collects for driverless vehicles come as a way of a crash. Oh, it didn't work out.
Right.
And there's just thousands of scenarios. That blows my mind when you really think about it. Real quick, one last thing that was in this article. It says those who are pursuing public service loan forgiveness should certify their work history with the Education Department now. We've got a little bit less than 45 seconds. How would you go about doing that, submitting your work history?
There's a form, Bob, and it's one of the reasons why the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program had so much trouble. People weren't filling it out right. So again, call the student loan servicer and ask, what do I have to do to have this properly documented? They should be able to send the borrowers right to a website and get that done pretty quickly.
Once again, the website is mycollegecorner.com. John, always great to talk with you. Enjoy your conference. We'll talk next month.
Look forward to it, Bob. Be well. Blessings.
Blessings to you as well. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.